The night was heavy. No reporters. No flashing lights. No bodyguards. Just the sound of a lone car engine cutting through the dry wind of Ouagadougou. It stopped right in front of the compound gate. Ibrahim Traoré was still awake. Not by habit, but by instinct. He often felt when something wasn't right. And tonight, something felt off. A silent knock at the gate. Not loud, not urgent. Just steady. The soldier outside blinked twice, confused. Because standing in the dark, lit only by the moon, was Jacob Gyllenhaal. Alone. No team. No cameras. Just him. And his hands. Blood. Not a lot. But enough to make the soldier hesitate before reaching for his radio. Traoré stepped out himself. He saw Jake. He didn't speak right away. Neither did Jake. They just looked at each other. Finally, Jake whispered something. "I need 5 minutes. Not more. Then I'll go." Traoré didn't nod. Didn't invite him in. He just turned and started walking. Jake followed. The hallway was dim, silent except for their footsteps. Jake looked around at the handmade art, the books, the worn-out sandals at the entrance. "Still feels like a home," Jake said quietly. Traoré glanced back. Jake added, "Not a palace." That's rare these days. They reached a small sitting room. One wooden chair, one small lamp. Jake sat without asking. He wiped his hands on a cloth Traoré handed him, still shaking. Then he said something no one expected. 3 days ago, I was in Morocco for a film. That's the official reason. But the truth? I was following someone. Someone I hadn't seen in 18 years. Traoré didn't interrupt. Jake leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice almost gone. I thought I'd be okay. I thought I was past it. But when I saw him, everything from that night came flooding back. Traoré asked calmly, "Who was he?" Jake closed his eyes. "A man I left behind, in Kabul." The room fell silent. Traoré didn't flinch, didn't move. Jake continued, his voice lower. "He saved me, once, during a mission I was never supposed to be on. I wasn't a soldier, but I was there, for reasons that still don't make sense to me. He covered me while I ran. I never looked back, until last week, when I saw him again, selling rugs, barely walking." Traoré's eyes stayed fixed. Jake clenched his fists. I tried to talk to him. He remembered me, smiled like nothing ever happened. Then someone followed us, took a photo, called someone. That night, they came for him. Jake's voice cracked. I fought back. I don't know what happened. There was shouting. One of them pulled a knife. I grabbed it. I didn't mean to. But when it was over, he was gone, and one of them was on the ground, bleeding. Traoré leaned forward now. Quiet, calm, but locked in. Jake's breathing was shallow. I panicked. I ran. Took the back road. No phone. And I knew I couldn't go home. Not like this. So I came here. Because somehow, I thought you'd understand. Traoré stood up slowly, his eyes soft but unreadable. He walked to the door, then paused. "Do you know why people come to me, Jake?" Jake didn't respond. "Not because I'm a leader or a fighter, but because I don't lie, even when it hurts." He turned to face Jake. "You want the truth?" Jake nodded. And Traoré said, "You're not here because you feel guilty. You're here because you finally saw what the world hides, and now you don't know what to do with it." Jake looked up, tears forming in his eyes. And that's when the door knocked again. But this time, it wasn't gentle. It was fast, hard, angry. Traoré looked at the soldier outside the hallway. One word. Who? The soldier leaned in close and said something that made both men freeze. Interpol. 3 men, looking for him. Jake didn't move. Traoré didn't blink. The silence between them now felt louder than anything they'd said before. Jake didn't even breathe. The word Interpol sat heavy in the air, like a storm about to break. Traoré turned back toward him. No panic, no fear. Just a deep, measured calm. Jake stood slowly. No one knew I was coming here, he said. Traoré's eyes narrowed. Someone always knows, Jake, especially when blood is involved. The soldier stepped closer. They're at the outer gate. We haven't let them in yet. Jake whispered, I'm not running again. His voice shook, but he meant it. Traoré nodded. Good, because you won't have to. He turned to the soldier. Let them wait. They're not coming inside without a name. The soldier saluted and left. Jake looked confused. You're protecting me? Traoré sat down again, slowly, his voice quiet but sharp. I'm not protecting you, Jake. I'm protecting the space where truth can still exist before the world turns it into a headline. Jake sat, but his body was still tight with fear. Traoré continued. Tell me exactly what happened. No filters. No edits. Because whatever you leave out, they'll use against you later. Jake nodded, then exhaled deeply. I followed him through the Medina. He had a limp, still smiled at strangers, still offered them tea. When I caught up to him, I couldn't speak. I just stood there. He looked at me and said, It's okay. You're here now. Jake swallowed hard. He forgave me, and I hadn't even said a word. That night, we went to his place. Small, dark, one fan on the ceiling, but it felt warm, real. Jake paused, remembering. We talked for hours, about nothing, about everything. Then I left around midnight. That's when I saw the car. No plates, parked across the street, engine running. I felt something was wrong, but I was stupid. I walked back to my hotel and thought, maybe I was imagining it. An hour later, someone slipped a photo under my door. It was us, sitting inside his room, and written on it in red ink, You should have stayed gone. Traoré listened without flinching. Jake's voice was smaller now. I ran back. His door was open. 2 men inside. They were yelling at him, pushing him around. I don't know what came over me. I just reacted. One of them pulled a blade. I grabbed a metal rod from the shelf and hit him. He dropped. The other one tried to grab me. In the struggle, the blade cut across my hand. Jake held up his still reddened palm. And then they ran. But I knew. Cameras, witnesses, maybe even bribes. It wouldn't matter. They'd twist it, frame it, and he'd suffer all over again. Jake looked at Traoré. So I left. I crossed into Algeria by truck. Paid someone everything I had to get me into Burkina. And the only person I could think to see was you. There was silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy, but charged. Traoré finally spoke. You didn't come to be saved, Jake. You came to be seen. Jake whispered, Is that wrong? Traoré shook his head slowly. No, but it means we have to be careful what we do next. He walked over to the small table and opened a drawer. Inside was a phone. Old, secure, untraceable. He dialed a number and spoke in his native tongue. Quiet, fast. Jake listened but didn't understand. When Traoré hung up, he turned to him. I've arranged for someone to check on the man in Morocco. If he's safe, we'll know soon. Jake's eyes lit up, just a little. Thank you, he whispered. Traoré stepped closer. But now, you need to make a choice. Jake's shoulders tensed. Traoré continued, "You can wait here and I'll send Interpol away. Or you go out there, speak to them yourself, and tell the truth." Jake asked quietly, "And risk everything?" Traoré gave a small smile. "You've already risked everything. The only question left is, do you want to own that risk?" Another knock on the door. This time, softer. The soldier again. They're getting impatient. They say they'll come in if we don't respond soon. Traoré looked at Jake. "I'll go," Jake said. His voice was steady now. "I'll talk to them." Traoré placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Then do it as a man who's no longer hiding, because truth doesn't run." Jake nodded, stood up, and walked toward the door. Traoré walked beside him, and as they reached the gate, Jake took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Whatever happens, I needed this." The gate opened. 3 men stood outside, dark suits, cold eyes. Jake stepped forward, and just before he spoke, one of them raised a hand and said something that neither Jake nor Traoré expected. "We're not here to arrest you." Jake froze. Traoré leaned in. "Then what are you here for?" The man reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a photo, held it toward Jake, and what Jake saw made his knees almost buckle. Because in the photo was the man from Morocco, smiling, standing beside someone Jake had never seen before. But the message written under the photo? "You were never the target." Jake's breath caught in his throat. His eyes scanned the photo again. The man beside his friend in the picture. Unfamiliar, tall, wearing dark glasses, had his arm gently over his shoulder. But the line written at the bottom in bold ink kept echoing in Jake's mind. "You were never the target." Jake looked up at the Interpol officer. "What does this mean?" he asked, voice low. The man didn't smile, didn't blink. "We've been tracking that other man for months. International arms trafficking. You just got in the way." Jake stepped back. "You let this happen? You knew who he was?" The man paused. "We didn't expect you to walk into it. But once you did, we watched. We couldn't move too soon, or we'd lose the bigger fish." Jake's fist tightened. "So my friend was bait?" The agent's jaw clenched slightly, but he didn't answer. Traoré finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "You used a man's life like he was a pawn. You followed an actor into another nation, let him walk into a trap. And now, you show up at my gate without warning?" The tallest agent stepped forward, lowering his voice. "We didn't know he was coming here. That surprised everyone." Jake whispered, almost to himself. "I told no one. No one but him even knew I left Morocco." Traoré turned to Jake. "Someone still followed you. And not Interpol. If they didn't know, someone else did." Suddenly, the entire energy of the compound shifted. This wasn't just about a mistake anymore. Someone wanted Jake seen. Bloody. Guilty. Lost. And someone wanted that photo to surface. The third agent, the quiet one, finally broke his silence. He handed Jake a file. "Inside is everything we've gathered about the man who slipped that photo under your hotel door." Jake's hands trembled as he opened it. Photos, names, times, and at the center, a face he recognized instantly. Not the man from Morocco, not the agents. It was his own security assistant from 3 months ago. A man Jake thought had left the set due to illness. Traoré looked over his shoulder. "That man worked for you?" Jake nodded slowly. "He carried my bags, scheduled my flights, quiet, always polite." Traoré's tone sharpened. "Perfect position to track you without raising alarm." The agent added, "He was on a private payroll. Belongs to a group we've been watching for years. Ex-military. Works outside the grid. We think they wanted to frame you, not arrest you. Just ruin you. Jake sat down hard on the wooden bench behind him. The weight of it all was crashing in fast. So, what now? He asked. The lead agent looked at Traoré. He's safest with you, for now. But this goes deeper than one mistake. Someone wants him erased, not for what he did, but for what he saw. Traoré looked to Jake. What did you see in that room, Jake? Before the fight, before the blood, Jake looked up, eyes wide. The man who was yelling at my friend, he wasn't just threatening him. He was asking for something. Traoré leaned closer. What? Jake took a moment, then whispered, a code. The agents all tensed at once. The lead one asked quickly, what kind of code? Jake's brow furrowed, recalling the moment. Something about delivery routes. Containers. I didn't understand it then. I thought it was just junk. But my friend kept saying, I don't have it anymore. I burned it. Then the man said, then you burned too. Everyone went quiet. The quiet agent finally said, your friend had access to smuggled shipping lanes. That's what they wanted. Traoré stood tall now. Then this wasn't about you. This was about silencing someone who refused to cooperate. And framing you was just extra. Jake's voice cracked. He saved me once, and he tried to save me again. The lead agent closed the folder and said, we'll give you protection. But if you stay here, it'll only be a matter of time before others come. Jake looked at Traoré. Then what do I do? Traoré didn't blink. You tell the truth, all of it, on your terms, before they twist it. Jake looked terrified. If I speak, if I go public, they'll come for me. Hard. Traoré nodded slowly. Yes, but if you don't, they'll keep doing it to others. Jake looked down at his hands, still faintly red, still trembling. And then he said something simple, but powerful. Then I speak. Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll do it together. Jake stood again. But then, the quiet agent's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. His face went pale. We've got a problem. Traoré turned quickly. What kind? The agent swallowed hard. They found the compound. Everyone froze. The room went still. Jake looked at the agent. They found us? The man nodded. Unmarked drone. Circling. It's not military. Could be mercs. Traoré's voice didn't shake. How long do we have? Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less. Jake stood up fast. I should go. I won't drag you into this. Traoré blocked the door. You don't run now. Not again. Jake looked torn, but he listened. The agents began packing their gear. Traoré handed Jake a clean shirt and a small black pouch. Inside is a drive, encrypted. It holds the names of people connected to that code and the ones trying to silence it. Jake stared at him. You had this all along? Traoré gave a faint smile. I always knew the truth would come for me too. I just didn't know it would come wearing Hollywood boots. They shared a rare, fragile moment of humor. Outside, tires crunched. Headlights pierced the compound wall. Jake moved to the window. 4 black SUVs. No markings. No plates. This is it, he said softly. Traoré nodded. Then we make it count. He handed Jake a small microphone, already connected to a secure line. You said you were ready to speak. Start now. Jake looked confused. Right now? Here? Traoré stepped closer. Yes, before they can rewrite it. The agent gave a quick nod. Jake's hand shook slightly as he clipped on the mic. A small light blinked red. Recording. He looked into the lens of the camera the agent set up, and he began. My name is Jake Gyllenhaal. I'm not a hero. I'm not a victim. I'm a witness. 3 days ago, I saw something that wasn't meant for people like me to see. But I saw it anyway, and the man who tried to protect me, his name is not in any newspaper. He's not a soldier or a spy. He's just a man who chose to do the right thing and paid the price for it. This isn't a story about me. It's a story about the ones the world forgets. The ones who stand between power and truth and disappear. He paused. Tears filled his eyes, but his voice didn't break. I've run from truth before, but tonight I stopped running. He looked at Traoré, then said, because some people don't get a second chance. And if I stay silent now, I'll never be able to live with myself. Traoré nodded once, and with a final blink, the red light on the mic stopped. Outside, footsteps approached. Fast, heavy, armed. The gate burst open, but inside that room, Jake stood tall. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't hide. He just waited, and as they stormed in, someone shouted, "Stop! He's already sent it." They paused, confused. The agent held up a second device. Footage is already in 3 secure clouds. If anything happens to him, it drops to every news desk in the world. Silence. One man growled under his breath, but they backed off. No arrests. No gunfire. Just silence. Jake exhaled for the first time in hours, and Traoré whispered, "Truth. That's how you survive the storm." Jake turned to him, or become it. If this story moved something in you, don't just scroll away. Leave a comment, even one word, and tell us what truth means to you. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, like, share, and subscribe. Because in a world full of noise, truth still matters. Sometimes we don't speak the truth because we're afraid of what it might break. But the truth doesn't break us. It frees us. Before the silence does.